Welcome all. I'm here today to interview a person I've been following for quite some time throughout social media, Damon Bramich, who's a Yang style lineage successor, which is awesome for me because I'm a Yang style practitioner, and I've been watching his material for quite some time. Watching him and his student Micah Mika over Micaiah over the years, and just obviously, being part of the Yang style as a practitioner, to watch someone who has a true lineage, which we'll talk about here in this interview, this conversational interview that we're going to have today, and it's definitely an honor to finally get a chance to get a kind of a virtual face-to-face with him. Get some of his insight and some details about his past and some of the things about Tai Chi in general. So good morning or good afternoon to you, Damon.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So
as I mentioned, I'm a fellow practitioner, and I have a line through one of the I guess we're going to say the Yang stylists out of what could be considered, I guess, the European line under Chu King Hung. It's kind of the line I follow. But just giving some of the stuff we'll touch on about these true lineage successors and holders, and try to get down to some of the details about that. But one of the key things that I wanted to talk to you about, one, is obviously your martial arts history, but your path to getting into being a lineage successor of the Yang family, because there's something that's very impressive, especially for someone outside of the family, which is usually quite unique, of course. But first thing is studying some of your understanding something you think about your history is that you come into it from a traditional Chinese martial medicine background through your mother. Could you kind of get a little bit more details about that? What got her into it, and then how it led you to your
path? I think predominantly my mother got into alternative medicine because she had a spinal injury in 1975. So there was a long road of recovery, and at this time surgeries weren't the same as they are now, especially with spinal decompression. So that's when they go in, take the vertebra or disc out, and they do the, put screws in and all that sort of thing.
Right.
Now, but having said that, her grandfather was an orthopedic physician, and his grandmother was a herbalist, and they come from a family that traveled around doing herbalism from the 16th century.
Oh, wow.
So there's that sort of healing background in my family for sure. Yes. My mother got interested in probably transcendental meditation first, astrology. Great. Sort of things, and I think the pathway in the late 70s and 80s was more towards a traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbalism, those sort of things. And I was only a kid when she was doing that. So I was already involved in martial arts at this stage. So my Tai Chi started when I was about 11, 12. We're not really sure. I was in my year 6 at school, so not at high school. I'm not sure what you guys call that, if it's middle school or something.
Some call it middle school. Down here in the South, up in where I come from originally, I'm from North Carolina originally, we call it junior high school.
Oh, no, I wasn't at high school. It was below high school.
Yeah, junior high, as we call it. Then we have high school is the proper, when you're like about to graduate time, and we have junior high school. But down here in Texas, they call it middle school. Yeah.
Right. So I started with a school, Australian Tai Chi Academy, and the form that we did was a Yang style based on more like Chen Manqing's form.
Right. My first form, actually, yes.
Yeah. And it was very popular at this stage, but it was also very weird because I was a young kid and I was taken to a class that was predominantly senior citizens.
But you actually prior to your Tai Chi, you had other martial arts. You had like Kung Fu and some karate and also
Yep,
some kickboxing, correct? Yes.
yep. So I started judo when I was 6, 7
Excellent.
years of age, and around the same time I did the Tai Chi, I started doing karate. Done a number of different styles of karate. So I got to black belt level in 3 different styles.
Oh,
So at
wow.
this stage in the 80s, it was really interesting because there was a lot of changes in karate. So there was a few groups that were getting control, like trying to get a government accreditation, government approval, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of changing of schools, and some schools not being able to keep running, so you amalgamate with a different school, et cetera, et cetera. So that sort of thing went on a lot in the 80s. At that time, did a lot of kickboxing.
Right.
Yeah. Also got some experience with the early Muay Thai that come to Australia in the
Oh, interesting.
80s. And there was a bit of Wing Chun. There was a guy, Jim Fung, in Sydney, had a massive Wing Chun school.
Okay.
And, a few times went down and had a look at that. Some of my friends that we were involved with the kickboxing did these styles, so introduced it. Also, I got exposed to a bit of boxing. um, One of my school friends was involved with the Waters family, so we trained with Cess Waters, and his sons won world championship boxing matches.
Nice.
Yeah, so Cess Waters, Guy and Troy Waters. So this is when I was
Awesome.
a teenager. So I grew up, and I don't know if you guys know of rugby league, rugby union,
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah,
kind of
yes.
like American football with no pads.
Yeah. So I lived in England for
Mm.
quite some time. So I'm
Okay.
very familiar with rugby. And you were in what's this, Perth, Australia? Is where you from?
No. I was in Sydney and Newcastle.
Oh, you're in Sydney at this time.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah,
Yes, I visited there.
yeah,
I love Sydney. It's awesome.
yeah. So, but it was a bit of a hot spot. Just excuse me.
Yeah, no worries.
Sydney was a bit of a hot spot for martial arts,
Yes.
definitely. We had a huge amount of Chinese immigration
Mm-hmm.
in Sydney. So we had, those Wing Chun guys, and then we had Chan Young Fa, Jolly Fut.
Right.
So he's the head of the Jolly Fut family, and he was in Sydney from the late 70s. So I actually went to that school for 3 years.
Oh, wow, 3 years. Okay, great.
Yeah, yeah,
Great.
yeah.
So,
I traveled around the city.
what was your experience like there for you? I mean, you dabbled, seemed like, in a lot of martial arts. Was there any particular thing that you were trying to identify with, or it was just out of a general curiosity, or is there a particular skill set you're seeking after?
No, I think I just wanted to fight.
Right on.
If you knew me from back then,
Yeah.
that was my mojo. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your
Um,
disposition back then? Then you said you wanted to fight. Was there any particular reason? Or is it like I spoke to my instructor and he was like, yeah, he was getting bullied a lot. He was getting fights because he was moving from school to school, different towns. But what
right.
was the motivator for you to wanted to have that little fighting spirit?
Look, I think I was the youngest boy in the family.
Hmm.
So the family was a pretty big family. So I was always an easy target when I was a real little kid.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed as I got older because, I think you grow up and you realize that you need to fight back to stop it.
Right on.
Yeah. And I think it's also a bit of a cultural thing.
Okay.
Australia and especially the years where I lived near the beach, there was a
Okay.
lot of rivalry. And we lived in an area, it was called the Central Coast. And there was a peninsula, and there was like 2 high schools in this area. So there was so much rivalry, and there was 2 football teams.
Gotcha.
So we knew each other. We were played against each other, but at different stages. I could go to school with one of my friends, but he'd be in the opposite football team.
You're right on.
So, and it was just something that we did.
Right. Right.
And it was not uncommon to have a bit of a scrap, not just a schoolyard scrap. This could be outside school, this could be at the beach. This continued up and when you're 16, 17, 18, we're going to the pubs and the clubs, and then that went into fighting. You'd
Oh
have
yeah.
scraps with grown men, and I was a cocky little bastard. So I was what you call a smart ass.
Yeah, yeah.
So and it was fighting, like you could have a proper fist fight and you're not going to get tackled on the ground or someone take you out from behind in a circle and that type of thing. So,
Right.
and I think it was just a rite of passage
Sure
back
thing. Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
80s. And very different to what I think it is now. And then we have that rugby league and rugby union. So we were playing really hard compact sports, contact sports, sorry.
Right
And
on.
I think that breeds something into you when you're already bashing up against people, and then, you want to be successful. I played rep in both union and football.
Oh, great.
So-
Okay.
And in the union, especially, I was in a touring team when I was 15 under 18s. So I was always playing against people at a higher level.
Oh, great. Great.
That was a pathway. It was starting to be a pathway to make money. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So it's a pathway to become a professional sports person. And some of my friends got that pathway. I wasn't able to get that pathway because I had to leave school because my parents didn't have enough money for me to finish school and then go to college.
Right
So,
on.
so I did an engineering trade
Oh,
when I
great.
was 16. So again, working in an industry, a metal industry where people were blacksmiths and boilermakers, and starting off as the young boy in this big, this man's industry, which is really heavy, hot, hard work.
Right
And I
on.
think that develops something in your body and in your
Of
mind.
course.
You start to work hard for things. Um, Getting back to all the Tai Chi and all these things is that because of my mother's exposure to Tai Chi and then my exposure to Tai Chi and the TCM, she got involved with the Mantak Chia's people.
Right. Oh, that's very impressive.
For, for a big period in the 80s, she was a devotee in this system. So I was fortunate enough to train with Nantak and his wife, Niwa. So I did all their workshops that they would do in Sydney, and then they'd have private disciple trainings, and I was taken along to these things. So all the Tai Chi, the internal practices, the Nigung, the bone marrow washing, the I
Right.
Qigong, all this sort of stuff.
Yes, sir.
So I incorporated some of these things into my training as well. So it kind of like stuck in my mind, all this stuff.
Did they
And
have
there,
did they
go
have their reputation that they have now and the popularity at that time, or was it just something that these are people we know, we're just going to learn these things, or was it already a buzz going on at that time?
I think it was bigger than what it was now.
Oh, wow. Okay, great, great. Okay, very lucky then.
Mm, mm. Um, in the mid 80s, he was very big.
Yeah.
So we hadn't been exposed to people like Fu Sheng Yuan or Chen Xiao Wang, or, you know, there was a few people that were connected to Chen Manqing's lineage via Huan in Sydney, and they
Hmm.
were teaching. There was a guy, Tennyson Yu, who was teaching Wu style, had some connection to the Wu family. I'm not sure which one it is, which Wu family. Um,
Gotcha.
so to me, I wasn't really into that thing. So they were doing things like breaking. When I was a kid, I went to something with nunchuck cheese people, and we put an arrow on your throat and the other end against the wall, and walk into it and break the arrow. And like
Right
I
on.
could do these things without their practices.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
to me, I was always skeptical of the depth that and what they were really talking about. And I think when you see a lot of, and you've done a lot of fighting, you sometimes have a different perception with.
Indeed.
Um, so we went through that period, did a lot of karate, a lot of kickboxing, and different styles of karate. So they all have a different flavor.
Right.
But I enjoyed the the kata stuff, and I also enjoy the weapons, and I enjoy doing the kickboxing, with pads, without pads. And there was a period of time where there was a lot of opportunity and groups were working together or intergroups where you'd come together and you'd be doing kickboxing and sparring or point sparring competitions or full-on kickboxing with pads or without pads. Um, and that led into myself and my teacher and a couple of other friends that did like state and national kickboxing events. So, yeah, and that culminated for me probably in 1991 when I was involved with one of my training partners, Greg Doyle, who fought the
Mhm.
Rock Major in Melbourne, and that was on Sky. That
Yes.
professional kickboxing bout. So they were getting paid. We got paid for that.
Uh-huh.
And so all expenses paid, he got cash money. He did lose a bout. He was sick prior to that, but we trained together, most days with him. And
Excellent.
originally that was going to be my role.
Right.
But at that time I smashed my big toe on my right foot twice.
Oh, wow.
Both trainings. So both actually kicking someone in the elbow and,
Oh, no.
both hitting and just smashing it good.
Yeah.
And that was around the time that I actually met Sifu.
Okay. Okay. In 91.
Around,
Oh,
yeah. So
so,
quite early. But I did Yang style. There was a chap called Luis Paderos, and he became a disciple of Chen Xiao Wang. He became a disciple of Chan Yangfa as
oh,
well.
okay.
And later, after me, become a disciple of Fu Sheng Yuan. And Lewis is in Chile now, I hear. So just down the road from me. People don't know I'm in
Colombia
Colombia.
now, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You made
So I
that.
had a bit of a life change. I still have my school in Australia.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I've created an opportunity to move around. So
Awesome.
cut a
Awesome.
long story short, in 1991, I met Sifu, but I've been training in the Yang style since about 87, 88.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
So the Yang style that I do. So similar line, similar in its content, but maybe not as deep as what we were hoping for at that
Right
time.
on. Right on. So
Yeah.
when you were competing, was there, you mentioned about the kickboxing, was the martial community kind of blending the competitions, or were they still pretty segregated? You had, like they have just the Wing Chun guys fighting over here and the Tai Chi guys, or was it all pretty much kind of grouped together at that time?
There was no Tai Chi guys fighting.
Okay, okay, okay.
So, no. No, seeing the kickboxing, that was the good thing about kickboxing because it wasn't, I'm a Wing Chun guy and I'm a Muay Thai guy.
Yeah.
It was more that you did kickboxing, you did boxing, and you did kicking. So it didn't matter whether you come from Taekwondo or karate or didn't come from Muay Thai or Wing Chun. You all had different attributes. But at the end of the day, you got gloves on and you're
Yeah.
punching, you're kicking, and you're doing very similar stuff. And
Yeah.
to be honest, the guys that were dominating, so this is back in the day, we had this guy from Melbourne, Stan Longanides, and Paul the Rock manager, and these guys had a lot more boxing background,
Got you. Yeah, yeah.
so they were dominating.
Right on, right on. Yes, of course, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't. It was before UFC.
Right.
Okay, so there was no going to ground with grappling,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, I remember the old days. I mean, I used to watch this obviously on TV in my the days of the '80s and things like. Because I hadn't even started martial arts until the '90s. But my brother and I used to watch all these fights on TV. We had the Vinny Urquez and all those folks back in the day, and we used to love it. Of course, and it, getting to see them travel and fighting around the world, and that was good to see it being televised back then. Like totally different now, of course, when the different fight scenes took over, but back then in the '80s and things like that, we used to watch all those guys go at it, and was always impressed with just the technique going. We're into boxing too as well, but watching kickboxing was a, oh shoot, these guys are kicking and spinning back kicks, and you're seeing all these axe kicks and things like that, and it's just, it was an amazing scene when you were involved. I know you mentioned earlier you're seeking a pathway almost to become professional. When you realized that your path wasn't going to go that way, was there always interest of maybe just being a instructor regardless, or did you? How did you think about it at that time once you weren't going to go pro, if you will?
Look, I think the injuries that I had stopped that aspiration. Now, I was already myself had already done the first stages of my massage training.
Ah, yes.
So by 1991, I was in my second year of training. So I was already qualified as a therapist by that stage in 1990. So by the end of that year, I was already qualified. So I did all this study as well. I finished I started doing some of the massage while I was still doing my engineering training because I had this interest.
Uh-huh.
Also, I started becoming aware of not only is it important to fight, it's important to heal and recover. That
Right
they
on.
seem to go hand in hand. And I think at that stage, I probably had a naive fantasy of this, you know, that martial arts master, in the books that the healer and the
Right
fighter,
on.
that sort of thing, and probably because of the influence with my mother and the earlier stuff with Mantak Chia and seeing that the health and the martial arts stuff went together. I think I was moving away already from that thing, so it didn't take away the fact that I like to punch on type of thing with
Mm,
boys, but it meant that the role changed for me when my friend was training and I got injured. So I went more to helping him.
right
Uh,
on.
and I started doing, some massage and nutrition and all these things brought into this. And as I said, it's not long after that fight I actually met Sifu. So I was intrigued about the quality, didn't really know a lot. And this was before really saw anything on videos of them
Yes.
king
Yes.
and pushing people around. And it's this great master, it has this great lineage. And my mother had all these books on Tai Chi. So he was the nephew of Yang Chen Pu,
Right
and
on. Yes.
that white book, that chap from up at New York wrote some nice books in the I can't think of his name.
Robert Smith, that guy, or did
No, no, no.
no,
The
no.
guy has the book that has Yang Chen Pu's pictures, has Chen Wang Qing. It's a white book, Tao of Tai Chi Chuan. And
Oh gosh. Something Jiao. Oh, what's the guy? Juan Jiao. I know
we're
exactly. I
talking
have
about
to.
the same guy, the
Yeah,
Yang Chen Pu's form and the Chen
yes,
form
yes, that's right. Yes,
and
all
the
that
Wu
stuff in it.
form. So I had all these books on the shelf, and my mother
Yes.
had Chen Wang Qing books on the shelf. And
Hmm.
so I was already aware of the significance of this person and just happened to be up the road.
Wow.
And basically, from when I met him, I hung out with him and I followed him that few weeks that he was in the Sydney Newcastle area.
Mhm.
And I stayed in the same place. I slept on the lounge and where he stayed and all these sort of things. And it was really, really interesting. We kind of clicked, but also he let me have a crack at him a few times and I just got my ass nailed. And I couldn't get it. I couldn't understand why this guy was laughing at me. And I'd run in and I'd try to punch him and I'd try to grab him and he just threw me back.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got dusted big time. And I had a crack at it 3 or 4 times. We're in this park. And he's going, "Oh, Damon, you're so funny. You no idea." And I'm thinking, what the fuck? Like, I've got no idea. I've been fighting, and I'm fighting with these dudes that are at this level of
Yeah.
fight. And you just destroyed me. And you think it's a joke. It's like running into that big guy in defense. He's 350 pound, you're
Uh-huh.
120 pound, bringing wet, and you run into this guy and you land flat on your ass, and you think, what the hell? I just ran into a car or an elephant or something. And
Which is interesting, real fast, because I was going to ask you this earlier when you mentioned about playing rugby. Because I'm used to seeing the guys being, very massive. But what is your stature?
um, when I was playing rugby, I was a skinny kid. Um, nearly 6 foot.
Okay, 6 feet. Okay, okay.
Yeah, nearly, and probably about what I said, 120 pounds.
Okay,
But
okay.
the thing is, I was fast.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
In my rugby team, my rep team, I was the fastest on the team, and I played in the forwards.
Okay, right, right. Nice. Okay.
And I played breakaway. So breakaway is the guy on the outside of the scrum.
Hmm.
So he has the ability to run in the backs, and he has the ability to run into the forwards. So having that skill of being the fastest person on the team. So I did athletics as well. So, I got to state and I got all these things. So it was about 7 sports I represented my zone in when I was in high school. So I was really into um and really, really competitive.
Right, right. Yes.
So it was very, very interesting. And it would, we just trained, and it was just that's what you did.
Right,
And
right.
I don't know if you know, in rugby, it's 15 guys against one. You've
Hmm.
got the chance to stay on your feet, come in and turn, hold the ball, try and pass it back.
That's right.
Or you then go to ground, you need to shield the ball with your body and put the ball down on the ground. Well, these guys just kick you in the back.
Right. I've seen it. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I wonder sometimes, did UFC take some of the ground fighting from rugby? Because rugby was certainly doing that before UFC come around. Um, It was okay. It's funny we talk about this. So when it come to football, I went back to football when I was about 30 because I moved to a country area.
Yeah.
And I was doing all the kung fu and I was doing all the massage and stuff like that. I just wanted to connect with people. So I go join the local football club. They give me a crack at football. They give me 10 minutes on one week. It was interesting because I tell you what, don't go into Zanzong or horse stance or something like that on a football field. You get killed. And yeah, that happened. Bunker down and then someone just flanks you and then you're dead. But
Yeah.
the thing is that then the next week, the president comes in and he said, "We got big trouble. We have really, really big trouble. You're still suspended." I
Oh,
was
wow.
suspended when I was 15 for viciously attacking the head of an opponent. It was the last game of the year.
He completely
And
forgot about it, huh?
no, I got a 4 week indefinite suspension. So 4 week meaning that every time you come back and started, you still had to play out your suspension.
Oh, man.
So 13, 14 years later, here I am, got big trouble for the club. They had to pay a fine to try and get out of this $2,000 fine
Oh,
because
wow.
I'm a suspended player. So,
Whoops. Yeah.
so my return aspirations for football were nullified.
Yeah.
I just then become the massage therapist and the strapper. But coming back to this long story with
Yeah.
the Tai Chi,
Uh-huh.
with
Uh-huh.
I think I was transitioning already in 91 and moving away. So I did remedial massage. At that time, I was doing deep tissue muscle therapy, which is similar to Rolfing. Actually, the guy that was teaching us, they come from that line, David Griffiths, from this guy, John Catone, who was studied with Ida Rolf and a few other famous people in the massage industry. And I got really deeply involved in that. So I ended up doing a teacher training for
Okay.
massage. And at that time, I think I worked in this college for 4 years and I was this gentleman's assistant. So I would follow him to a couple of classes a week and be the assistant in all the classes. So I got to do these courses again as an assistant and really started to change my focus.
Okay.
At this point in time, I went back and was learning the long form. So, and I was still doing Cholly Fut.
From Master Fu, or were you learning it with someone else at that time?
I did do it, but at that time it was really, like you go to a workshop, and this is what people need to think. The reality, you go to a workshop and you're one of 50 people. You're only one of 50 people at that workshop. There's only one.
Right.
They may go to many, many workshops. And I say this to my students. There's one teacher in 100 students. Okay, so the teacher spreads his energy around. So it's really hard to get that closeness with the teacher.
Right on.
You start developing a relationship where you start learning at your own capacity, not
Right.
at their capacity.
Right.
And it's important when we talk about dissemination and learning, is that the student can only learn at their capacity.
Right on.
So
Right
when we start talking about dissemination and then how much someone obtains, it fragments a lot. So
Right on.
lineage is fragmented really quick with these things. Just
Yeah.
have a
Sure.
we went out last night. It was late.
No worries.
Our first night back into the city.
Oh, cool,
Been
cool.
away
Yeah.
for 15 weeks. So anyway, so get back to that thing there. So in my own path, I started looking at becoming as much of a healer
Mm-hmm.
as a fighter. And I started to let some of that stuff go. And
Sure.
it was an interesting journey in that early 90s because I really, really enjoyed Cholifat. Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
Young Fat, they were extremely, extremely strict with the chap that I trained with. This guy called Lung, really big guy, and he was the disciple of Chan Yong Fa, and he took all the beginners classes. And I learned from that time is that the importance of the basics. So I would go to class and we'd be doing stance work. Now, this is interesting. They did things like Zanzong, but Zanzong was not done as a big practice, and Zanzong comes from Shaolin. But you learnt this in a deep stance because you needed to just develop the structure so then you could turn in the
Yes.
in this deep wall stance. So you go
Yes.
side, 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 with a big whip of the waist, and then you'd start adding all this other stuff to
Uh-huh.
it. And surprisingly, there was this real big link because this is some of the same similar stuff that I did with Chen Xiao Wang, and then some similar stuff with Fu Sheng Yuan, with big deep stances, and people have probably seen some stuff of mine and go, "Oh, it's Charlie Fut," and it's like, no, it's actually what Sifu showed me, which is really similar because they all have a similar origin, and during that period in the early 90s, because I was doing the massage, I moved away from combative fighting.
Right. Right.
Things started to change in 92, 93 because UFC started coming.
Right.
Okay. And MMA wasn't big, but UFC was there. And so the focal point started to change in martial arts.
Sure
And
thing. Yep.
the lucky thing for me is this gentleman, Lewis, was involved. And there's a lovely chap called Howard Choi. Howard Choi was a student at Sao Chun in Hong Kong. So Howard trained with a group with Erle Montague, and my mother was involved in this group. So they did Yang style and Chen Men Ching style, and they did meditation and push hands, and they did all these things. And Howard sponsored Chen Xiao Wang to come
Okay.
to us, and Lewis was in this thing. So I got exposed to Chen style direct from Chen Xiao Wang. And it
Mhm.
was like my first exposure of Chen style is with this person.
Great.
And like really, really fortunate. But again, they're doing this standing. He did a lot more standing. He would do half an hour, 40 minutes. I hated it. I did this, yeah, and it was kind of like, I want to move. I want to move. I want to move. I want to move. And, but cut a long story short, so we got this connection with Chen Xiao Wang coming to Sydney. But in my mind, there were so many similarities to Charlie Fun. They had some of the
Yeah.
same names. I'm not great with names. With
Likewise. Yeah.
Yeah, but they had the similar names, similar stances. They used most of the same weapons.
Excellent. Wow. That's
And it's
interesting.
interesting. I would talk to the Cholifat people about this, and they would say, Chen style is from Shaolin. They're just down the road.
Oh, wow. Very
This is before
interesting.
Chen got big. The other thing that was really interesting is that we're at a dinner in the early 90s. Fu Sheng Yuan and Chen Wang was there. Chen Wang said his style is not Tai Chi. He said it's Pow Choi.
Very interesting. So, I mean, not to
He's
dive,
saying it's culturally. But
not,
his relative is Chen Fuka said the same thing. It's written down that Chen style wushu is not Tai Chi, but now it's Tai Chi. Anything's Tai Chi now.
I hear you. So it's interesting, really quick. My teacher had this, like note about that, and our interview was saying, his no, I guess he didn't want to discount, because he met and went the first time introduced was Chen Xiao Wang to him as well. Chen Xiao when he came out to England,
Wow.
and one of his things was they did the silk reeling and things like that. But he was like always curious as to how true the connection between what Chin style was and then what Yang style is known to be, the separation of the two and how uniquely different they were. And for you to say what you just mentioned, I mean, even back in the '90s, he was having that discussion about like, is it really the same? Because significantly, the way they obviously the forms. He was looking specifically at the forms and things like that, and like they seem very different to me. So he always had that question. But in our recent interview, he talked about that. So for you to point that out is very interesting. But do continue because you were saying how it's Patsui versus being Tai Chi.
Well, I'm going to fast track to something that Sifu
Sure.
told me in the last few years of his life, and that the most of the books talk about Yang Lu Chen learning from what is it? The Chen master,
Right.
Chen Chan Chin, I
Mm-hmm.
think he's pronounced. And towards the end of Sifu's life, now he'd always talked about this character Jianfa, but towards the end of his life, he started saying my relative, meaning Yang Lu Chen, which is his great great.
Very fun. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And because if people don't understand, Fu Sheng Yuan was the first male of the fifth generation in the Yang family. His
Right.
mother was Yang family. So
Mm-hmm.
his mother married the granddaughter of Yang Qianhao.
Right.
Okay. Um, that's another long story. But coming back to that story, he started saying that my relative learnt from Jianfa in the Chen village, not the Chen family, because he wasn't Chen family and he wasn't allowed to learn it.
Right.
He did watch some of their wushu, and now if people understand the history, that he was in Chen family 3 lots of 6 years, and at the end of that, the last end of that, that it wasn't the Chen family that told him the secrets; it was Jian.
Very
Because
interesting.
they were both non-Chen people. So of course it's okay for them to share the knowledge. Now the Chen family uses some of that knowledge in their wushu.
Got you.
That's evident, but as a from a biomechanical point of view, they are worlds apart, like absolutely worlds apart. And
Yes.
when you understand how the flexors and extensors work and how structural alignment works and body positioning works, in body memory, you can't be that and then be this. You are yourself in concrete. Hence, like, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson's not going to go out and start doing Taekwondo.
Right on.
He's
Yes.
in his, it's like in his DNA, but it's really in his muscle memory.
Right on.
Okay,
Yes.
and that's carried through. And this is really important people understand. The muscle memory is huge, has a huge impact on your form.
Right.
And there's a big thing that happens between muscle memory and mindfulness. And a lot of people then transition out of mindfulness and rely on muscle memory. And that's a really hard thing. There's another huge, huge subject there. So coming back to that thing with the changes in the early 90s here is that I moved away. I got into health. And I did, at this stage, a lot of these subjects weren't at university. So I did many, many diplomas, I think 7 or 8 diplomas. And then I was fortunate enough I traveled overseas and I studied acupuncture in Sri Lanka. Went to a university there. And it was, that was bizarre in the early 90s as well. I did some
Mhm.
stuff in China. So I did enough and I got myself qualified and I worked as a practitioner pretty much since 1992. So I moved away from my engineering trade, but I had to go back a couple of times in my life because of financial reasons.
Of
But
course.
this stuff with the Tai Chi now, in the early 90s, Sifu was coming back and forth from Perth to the East Coast.
Okay.
And several times he brought his father, but I never went to the workshops with his father because just thinking, why do I want to see practice with this old man that's in his 90s? Because
Right.
like that was a huge mistake in one sense because I was doing Buddhism and I went to another retreat and I remember that specifically. And then I went searching for Kung Fu. So I went overseas and I did acupuncture and then I went to China. And mainly I was in the bottom end because I went down, I was looking for Tai Chi and I was looking for Chow Fat and looking for Shaolin stuff. And, I learned some like crane Kung Fu or Manus, you do all this turning and all
Right
this
on.
stuff and breaking with the fingers and all this sort of thing. And when I was in China, it was really interesting because I had a picture of Fu Sheng Yuan. And I was asking people, and they were saying, some people are saying, why do you want to train with this old people? This is the old way. No one does this way anymore, which was really interesting. No one practices this way anymore. It's the
Wow.
old way. And then other people were saying to me, why are you wasting your time here? These people live in Shanghai. You need to go there.
Hmm.
So that was really interesting. I was away for a few months and I never got to Shanghai. If people went to China in the very early 90s and they had two monies, FEC, RMB, foreign exchange, it was really, really hard to move.
Yes.
I had zero Chinese.
Mhm.
Uh, it was taking days to just travel, 500 kilometers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, virtually no cars on the road. There was buses and boats.
Got
Virtually
you.
no decent rail. Um, Things have changed so much.
Sure.
People
Sure.
really living in poverty. Pretty amazing time to be there. And people were practicing kung fu, wushu, all these different things. Um, Similar thing with Hong Kong. When I was in Hong Kong, it was really interesting at that time. And I go to the Charlie Fuck school, and then they said, what are you doing here? The best schools in Sydney. The master's in Sydney. What are you doing here?
Yeah,
Like they must have been
and
thinking
that was
stupid.
Master Chan, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
So things really changed for me in the 90s. I really got into it. I really, really got into Tai Chi, and I have a friend who's actually a disciple, and he trained with Sifu with me, come to a
Okay.
number of shops, Matt, and not Matt Stamp, another Matt.
Okay.
And so we did all the traditional training, we did all the push hands, and we just trained together, blah, 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 for a number of years. And it was about 94, Sifu asked me to start teaching.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
pretty much what, like 3 or so years, 2 or 3 years afterwards. Yeah, meeting him.
yeah, but you have to understand that that was like I'm 24, but I also started 13 years before.
Right on. Yes. 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 All the other.
I also had at that stage 5 diplomas in different bodywork areas and accredited practitioner at that stage. So
Was it easy for you to make the connection of all the TCM and the body work and the massage that you were doing into your Tai Chi Chuan practice? Was it a direct line for you, like, oh, just all this stuff works together? Or did you kind of have to get kind of like coached to make that connection?
no, and I thinking there's some loose connection, but they're not really connected.
Okay, okay.
Okay, and I'm going to say this from a standpoint is that you need to go much more deeper into the body. And the beautiful thing about what I was doing is that the college I was working is that we got to do things like going to wet labs. So we got to go to cadavers and we got to pull them apart, so inside people's bodies. So we really got to see it hands
Sure.
on. Um, when it comes to healing and when it comes to health, possibly the biggest thing is the nervous system with healing,
Okay.
that you need to do things that are going to elicit a response on the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve relaxes. So the body, and this is a funny thing, when we're talking about relaxation, and it gets even bigger for me because during this period, I started getting interested in somatic psychotherapy, so body orientated analytical psychotherapy. So it becomes really, really interesting when you start, because I wanted to learn more about the mind. I wanted to learn more about the body, and I wanted to be the best I could at martial arts. So I'd already found a benchmark, a guy that I could not touch,
Yeah.
hand on, and I still had the youthful tenacity. Is I want to have a crack at this fella, and I want to work it out. Why? Why? How come? How come? Why? How come? How come? Why? And here's on the other side of me is that I also want to be able to help you. And I got into what we call a general practice, where I saw everybody. I didn't go down the path of just being a sports practitioner, though
Right.
I with many, many um, professional, semi-professional, and some elite athletes. Um, it was a different line, and it's like they were parallel, but they come in and come out a little bit with each other. It was like one is not this other. But then there's this other thing in hindsight, and we talked about this the other day,
Yeah.
that I got to put my hands on people a lot.
Is it
So,
like reading a book? I equate pushing hands to that when I meet different people. Like each person is a book that you're reading, and now you're getting informed knowledge that you retain, if you will,
I think when you touch somebody and you start to feel and observe, and I'm not going to say you go in and you're looking for your center type of thing, because in a martial arts sense, that's really risky if there's a skilled player on the other end.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
um, need to be really careful. If you've trained with a really skilled player, you would never do this. You would
Mm,
never try this sort of thing. It's too dangerous. You're not on the arse. You can get really hurt.
yeah.
A skilled player is going to respond like that and annihilate you. While you're going in there looking, you're going to get smashed. You can't play this way. There's none of this. Sorry, I've got mosquitoes.
No, no, no worries, no worries.
And welcome to Colombia.
Right.
Um, kind of got off the track a little bit there, but this thing about being a healer
Hmm.
and a martial artist, to me, is more complete. And I think it's like, you've probably heard this cliche, is that the crazy fighter, you trains enough and you train the fight out of you. You still have the fight, but what you start doing is you start approaching differently. So there's a better pathway, because at the end of the day, two guys start punching on and start a fight. No one wins, because you hurt somebody. You can feel this inside.
Of course. Yeah.
If you're not feeling that inside, you're psychotic, which
Yeah,
means
sociopath.
another issue you need to work on.
Yeah.
Okay. But this process of, and then you pull that back into, say, mindfulness. The clearer you are with your mind, and the less, as I would say, muscular armoring you have, because you've been having therapy. But if you're doing the Tai Chi right and you start get that reciprocal innovation, that means that I open and close correctly. Okay. So I think over time, to answer some of that questions, that I started using some of the rhetoric from my professional background as a physical therapist. I call myself a therapist generally, but physical therapist, is using some of the ideas and the concepts. Okay, I need to relax the vagus nerve part of the nervous system. How do I do that? Well, I can do that by slowing down, but I can't do that by collapsing.
Right.
I need to slowly graduating release. Okay. And the release can't be letting go suddenly, in that sense of obtaining relaxation. Because if you're thinking, you need some firmness in relaxation, you need some relaxation in firmness. This is yin and yang. Now, remember, Tai Chi got its name because that scholar saw Yang Lu Chan's movements, and it depicted the interchange of yin and yang.
Right on. Yes.
So now we have this little difficulty here because you cannot be just internal
Hmm.
because that is actually not Tai Chi.
Right on. Right
You
on.
can't
Excited.
just be external. Now, here's another thing. You it's bollocks because if you pull the body apart and a cadaver apart, there is no internal and external. If you think external is your skin, your exoskeleton type of thing, that's your skin, the biggest organ. But then when you're inside, it's all connected.
Right on.
It all moves together. So I think the way that I like to approach things is to move away from this blindness and madness of internal and external, because our goal is wholeness.
Right.
I
Yes.
need to move in harmony as one. Read the principles. The principles say the internal, external need to be together. The
Right
up
on.
down need to be together.
Yes.
And the other thing that's really, really important is that the mindfulness is actually tacked on to your ability to have all parts moving together.
Right
How
on.
often do you look at a Tai Chi master or someone that quotes themselves as this, that they're leaving a limb out there to dry, it's just hanging there. I've got my hand in single whip and I move everything away, but this arm stopped. That's
Yeah.
not Tai Chi. Okay, because you've got one part stopped and some parts moving.
Right on. I got
Now,
you.
that actually is a visual depth of mindfulness can be seen with this.
Okay.
So if you're not moving holistically, it's seen. If you're only focusing on one aspect, it's seen by someone who's obtained the level. It's like Sifu taught me to observe. And observing is really important. Now, when I go back to a clinical sense, is that you need to observe.
Yes.
You need to look at the gait. Gait is how someone walks.
One walks. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to look at their structure. You need to look at their structural alignment. Okay. You need to then look at how they present their energy, whether they're rigid or whether they're collapsed. All these things matter. So then
Indeed.
you start to see, and then you've then got this other aspect when we have this crossover of both therapy. Has the person got spirit? Is the person alive? Is the person they've got something going on in their body, or they're just like,
Right on. Yes. Yes. Dude.
and all
Impressive.
these things are really, really important. So here I am, I've got this crossover and this huge amount of information coming in. And I go off and I start teaching Tai Chi in 94. And I'd already had a little bit of a crack, in the karate days, you get a black belt, you're always teaching the juniors. This is a natural process. And I did this like a teacher training thing with this college. And from my end, I was probably too young. I never actually got to teach massage with them solo. So I was involved at the assistant level all the time, or, I did a couple of clinics, running the clinics and things like this, but I never actually taught in this professional college. At that stage, I did later on. I come back and taught
Yeah. Nice.
practitioner development workshops, CEP,
Excellent.
and and my specialty was myofascial decompression.
Okay.
So
Oh,
it's really interesting when we have this fascial talk, and I'm sitting back and going, "Okay, really, all
yeah.
right."
It's so like it is funny to me, right? Because again, I refer to this. Obviously, he's my point of reference. My instructor, we were just talking about this in his interview. Was talking about the fascia. He goes, "Oh, this new thing of the fascia." He goes, um, like in his training, he goes, "I didn't, wasn't really thinking about it on that level. We just did it. But now that they're talking about fascia, I guess I can just hold a seminar and start talking about it now since it's a new buzzword type thing. But for you to bring it up in that point, in that perspective, as that's being like the new thing that people want to connect with the practice as being something significant to that level. So go on, continue. What is your take on this new, trend of it?
What's the principle say? You need to develop martial mind, not be thinking about all this stuff. This is a
Right.
distraction. It's not going to make your kung fu better.
I totally agree. Yes.
And this is the thing is that I learned traditional. So I've actually learned all the traditional steps, and in the sense that I spent Sifu, this is the thing. In a traditional lineage, you don't learn everything necessarily from your teacher. Maybe you're learning it from a certain one or two other Kung Fu brothers. I have a Kung Fu brother, Chris, who I trained with for 25 years,
Awesome.
who I spent a lot of this time doing push hands. Okay, so that was part of our journey because he's disciple as well. He was
Sure.
disciple for me, and we were just lucky that we were in the right place at the right time.
Right on.
A little bit older than me, but and there was a rivalry there as well,
Mm-hmm.
and a camaraderie.
Yeah.
But in the traditional lineage, it's 7 years before I really got taught push hands by my teacher. The
Oh,
seven
wow.
years before.
Oh, gotcha. So really quickly, and this is just so you can kind of answer a question that my teacher had mentioned. He said that particularly in a Yang style, there's what you call it form inside of forms, where you have the open and closed form, you have the spiraling, you have like different aspects of the form that is kind of taught in a process as like, all right, you now how much is that kind of related to, or is it kind of part of that understanding of the form, like because you said you're mentioning that you did a lot of form first, so is there different aspects of the form that you have to go into to eventually get the complete form, I guess, if you will?
That's a complex question. It really
Okay,
is
sure,
complex.
sure, 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 no worries.
Um, I would suggest that a lot don't go past the basics.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Just think of the choir. Just think of the choir.
Yes.
So it's really easy to see when a choir's not in the right position. If your choir's not in the right position, you can't have Jin Li Dian, you can't have Chun Tse Jing.
Right on.
Okay. So it has to be there all the time. It also
Yeah.
means that you're not turning from the waist properly. You're going to be collapsing your hips.
Yes.
So my beginning of my Tai Chi journey was these things back to the main stance. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Bow stance needs to be perfect. Your transitions need to be perfect. I was taught, as Sifu would say, to play under the table. Now, play under the table means that your lead leg is parallel to the ground. So the lead leg femur in bow stance is parallel to the ground.
Oh, okay,
That is
okay,
the
okay.
depth of, now that is the traditional depth. Now, I'm young, I'm the same age as his son. Okay, we're a similar age. James is, we're less than 1 year apart.
Right, right.
And so when you're practicing at this level, is different again.
Okay.
Okay. So your depths is, I'm not set up because of my light, but I'd like to show you. So your depth and learning, and where I learn is that the traditional method is that the lead leg is parallel to the ground.
Gotcha.
Okay. The other thing is that you need to learn to turn on the solid leg.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, this is not easy, and especially if you're not taught properly. And a lot of people say, "Oh, it's not good for this, and it's not good for your knee." This is all bullshit, like
Yes.
complete bullshit. This is just you haven't been taught properly. Fundamentally, if you don't turn on the solid leg, you can't get Jinshishin.
Guy.
You only are doing a dare. Okay, this is the modified versions. It doesn't matter what you say or who you said you trained with. It is a modified version. This is the last version that Yang Chen Pu taught to the public, not to the few family members. Okay. The other thing
Understood.
we talk about Yang Chen Pu is Yang Chen Pu was the third son of the third son. Okay, he
Right,
was
yes.
family head. Yang Chen Pu was sent to Shanghai by the family to spread the art,
Got you.
not because of his greatness. He became great because he's a big guy.
Yeah.
If you're 320 pound, of course you're going to be able to throw a guy around that's 120-pound ring and wet.
Right
Like
on.
this is not. It's like really need to just be logical with this thing. So here we are. Is that I'm learning slowly. I'm learning the form. The form needs to be right. And look, and there's a video up there. If someone wants to have a good laugh, look at me doing Yang style in 1992. You know, not only did I have really bad fashion sense, but my form was appalling.
Yeah, yeah,
Like it's appalling. It's hilarious. And I put it there to show people you grow.
yeah. Over
You
time.
grow. Okay.
Yep.
These pictures of Yang Chen when he's some people saying 1918 and some people saying 1922, 1923, when it was in the first book, and then the second book, they're much different. Yang
Yep.
Chen was taught by his older brother, two older brothers, I might
Yep.
say,
Hmm.
also by his cousins.
Mm.
Okay. Now, conveniently, the Yang family for many years removed Yang Xiaohao and Yang Xiaofen. Okay.
Got you.
All right. They've been removed. They're in the lineage that's on my website. It's very clear because I know who Sigong trained with. There's
Right.
5 members of that generation, third generation. Okay. Not one, 5.
Got you.
Okay. And now you also have the young Bunhouse son.
Right on. Yes,
Okay?
yes. I saw you
So
on your site.
Yang
Yeah.
Xiaopeng. So Sigong trained with Yang Xiaopeng from what they call in China is 7 years old, which is
Mhm.
about 5 or 6, give or take what time of year it is.
Sure.
And, that's a significant thing. That's a really significant thing. So it's not that Fu Wen just turned up in Shanghai in 1925 and
Yeah.
he just happened to marry the most famous master's granddaughter. Like, seriously? This is not the culture. That
Right.
was an arranged marriage.
Yes, 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 yes.
That was an arranged marriage because it was already seen that Fu Wen had the qualities to take the Yang family into the next generation. This was before Yang Chen was in Shanghai.
Got you. Got you. Yes.